I was in Khon Kaen, Thailand, and I was approached by a distributor who said, I've heard about this product manufactured by this company, sold by this company, that I'm just going to call Company X. Top distributor said they've got a lot of studies. I hear good things about it. Would you please look into it? I said I would, and I did. I researched it. And what I found out is there, instead of a lot of clinical studies, there was a clinical study. I looked at it. To me, it was inconclusive. So I sent it to our scientists. They said, there's nothing here. It starts somewhere and ends nowhere. Well, as evidence of that fact, they were recently very sternly warned, reprimanded publicly by the FDA. False claims, illegal claims, and warned to stop or face shutdown. I was in the Shanghai airport, China, and I ran into 2 or 3 executives from one of the companies in our same space, and we had 40 minutes to talk, and I knew a couple of them already, and they told me what they were doing, where they had been, and I asked them a question. I said, so what are your leading products? I didn't know. And they said, well, we really have a single leading product, but it's very good. I said, well, that's interesting. Tell me what it does, how it works. And so for several minutes, I listened to them, and they really couldn't describe what it did or how it did it. I'm serious. Finally, one of them cleared all the confusion and said, well, it does something on the cellular level with the mitochondria. Well, that explains everything, right? If you ask our owners, our executives, anybody on my team, how do your products work? What do they do? You better have an hour and a half to 5 hours, because we will give you chapter and verse, how it works, where are the studies, how we have affected the lives physically, financially of millions of people all over the world. We live in a world of exaggeration and deception. Now, Unicity is not strong because they are weak. Don't make that mistake. No, we are strong because we are strong. We rest on very solid financial foundations, very solid scientific foundations. You'll hear from Dr. Bikman in a few minutes. You will just feel the strength that we have.
These are moments that I really welcome, because as a scientist, I get tired of just plugging away in my lab, which is actually outside this door right across the hallway. And today we were doing experiments on measuring brain energy function in the lab, always studying energy. As Micah mentioned, my scientific expertise is fuel use. What does the body do to get energy, and how does it use that energy? And that was very much at the heart of the Activate related products that Micah mentioned a moment ago. I really appreciate the sentiment that both Clayton and Micah have expressed, namely this desire to avoid hyperbole. As a scientist, I don't like speaking in hyperboles. In other words, extreme language, dramatic language. I like talking about the data. Now, I'm sure all of you are groaning a little bit. You've heard it from a lot of scientists these days. Aren't we all getting a little tired of scientists? I know I am. And imagine my wife, she has to go to bed with a scientist every night, but I don't talk about COVID, but you guys think heavens. I liked what Clayton had shared with me earlier. I just changed my screen. Hopefully you can see this. I was really struck by this sentiment when I was speaking with Clayton and the team about some ideas I could share with you during my time. I liked this because we so often focus on obviously dangerous things, or when it comes to lifestyle, obviously unhealthy habits. For example, if you have a friend who struggles with an addiction with cigarettes or alcohol, it would be tempting to say, just stop. And if they could just stop, they would be better for it. They will absolutely be healthier if they stopped doing that habit. When it comes to the food we eat, we can't just say stop. We have to eat. This is a necessity. So if someone is struggling with unhealthy food habits, there's so much more nuance that has to be addressed. And so the food we eat is either the culprit or the cure. It's very much going to be something that is helping us be healthier or making things worse. Now, hopefully you can all see me again. Am I doing this right? Okay, great. I see Deb's on her iPad. She gave me a thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, let me, now I want to take a few minutes with you guys and just talk about some of the science, indeed. And please, again, as I always say, appreciate just how unique it is that a supplement company, if I can call Unicity that, and that might not be fair to say, is having a scientist come speak with you. As you know, I study energy use. That means I understand why the body stores energy, why the body gets fat, how the body loses fat, and what are the health complications that come with that. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we are surrounded by junk food, by these processed foods that unfortunately are designed by other scientists to I hate to use the word enslave, but to want you to crave them all the time, to make you addicted in a way to them. What they've done in order to make these very, very palatable foods and very accessible, in other words, affordable, they've done really kind of these three cardinal sins when it comes to food. They're all very refined starches and sugars, and specifically that means they've removed the fiber from them. They have enriched these foods with artificial fats, these industrial seed oils, and then they have removed the protein because protein is expensive. So processed foods will always be deficient in protein. They may have plenty of carbohydrates, they may have plenty of fat, but it's the protein that's going to be deficient because, as I said, protein is pricey. What can we do? What can you do as you're speaking with your loved ones about this, your friends and your family? And now more than ever, metabolic health matters. This is not hyperbole. Someone having too much body fat is the single most relevant pre-existing condition that will determine whether their COVID infection, which, let's face it, we're all going to have to deal with at some point, whether it will be mild or whether it will be severe. Having too much body fat is the single leading relevant pre-existing condition. So we want to fight this. We want to maintain our metabolic health now more than ever. How can we fight this? I've mentioned these three problems. Well, there are three solutions, and truly you have the solutions. It is to encourage the diet to shift back to focusing on fiber, ensuring there's sufficient fiber, ensuring that there is then also sufficient protein and fat of the best sources. Once again, as I mentioned, you have this. These are tools you have in your toolkit to share with your loved ones, your friends and your family who may be worried about their metabolic health or they want to keep their metabolic health. Now, the three solutions built upon three specific products. The first one was Balance. That is the workhorse, of course, for Unicity. And you know a great deal about the product specifically and the specifically designed fiber that comes with it. Fiber is meant to come with any carbohydrate. In nature, carbohydrate always has fiber, but like I'd said, that's been stripped out because a company that wants you to buy more of their foods, their processed fake foods, they don't want the fiber in there because the fiber will promote too much satiety. And you would eat their snacks and you'd be done. You'd be full. You wouldn't want any more. That's not good business. They want to ensure that you continue to eat it. And stripping out the fiber is a good way to make that happen. My suggestion, although your coaching might have some things that will deviate from this, and that is fine, but appreciate that when you take that fiber, you potentially, depending on what you're coupling it with, you eat the fiber and it depends on what you follow it up with. But assuming it's a sort of moderate mixed macronutrient meal where it has some carbohydrates, but it's not pure junk food like an ice cream, for example, but you can lower that insulin and that glucose curve. You know, you eat that food and it spikes up your glucose and the insulin will follow it. You can depress that by up to 50%. The fiber will physically alter the digestion of those carbohydrates. And so my suggestion is that whatever your biggest, most carbohydrate-rich meal of the day is, and for me, that's dinner, you precede that meal by taking a Balance. Now, I mentioned for me, dinner's my biggest meal. I follow the Activate principles with regards to nutrition. Indeed, those came from my brain. Control carbohydrates, prioritize protein, and fuel with fat. The second two, the fuel with fat and prioritize protein, those are the basis, those two macronutrients of my breakfast and my lunch. I can perfectly control those meals. Me being very strict won't affect my family dynamic. My children, when I wake up and I'm making them breakfast, which I do every morning, they don't mind if daddy isn't eating the same thing they are, although the breakfasts I make for them are always very good. And then my lunch is strict. It's something that I will focus on to really fit those rules in. But dinner is dinner. Whatever my family is having, I will eat dinner with my family. So if my little 10-year-old wants to make dinner and she wants to make some pasta dish, some spaghetti, I'm going to eat everything she makes because she's my 10-year-old daughter and I love her to bits. I will eat dinner with the family, but because I know it will have more carbohydrate in it than I might want, or more refined carbohydrate, I will then take the balance. So focus with balance on having that precede your most carbohydrate rich meal. That's the time to take it. In fact, let me flip that around a little bit. I believe you shouldn't be taking the balance before you take the other products that I'll mention, namely fuel and especially base. With fuel, you could Unimate Fuel, but you don't want to take it with base, lest it, or at least before it, if you took it with it, maybe, but you don't want to mitigate absorbing those fats and those proteins. So if you are coupling with that, the balance with those products and it's been working, well, then I'd say stick with it. But don't feel the need to couple those to precede base or fuel with balance. Use balance. By my estimation, the best way is before your most carbohydrate rich meal, or when you do have an indulgence. If you are going to have ice cream because that's your family treat or whatever, I would still suggest you take it before that as well. Now, after one last comment on that, insofar, when I think about balance, I think about glycemic control. I think about controlling glucose and insulin, although there are other benefits such as blood lipid alterations. I focus more on glucose and insulin. That's my area of expertise. After you've had that most carbohydrate-rich meal in the day, I strongly encourage you to get up and do something. After you've eaten, do not just go sit on the couch. If you just go for even a 10-minute walk, even if it's too cold to my friends in Canada, and I'm from Alberta, I know what winters can be like up there. Even if you're just roaming around the house a little bit, just stay active for about 10 minutes at least, and you will significantly bring that glucose and insulin curve down. So a little bit of physical activity after your most carbohydrate-rich meal is perfect. Now, I've said enough about that. In fact, I've probably said too much. Micah, you make sure I don't go over. Remember, guys, I'm a professor, so one thing I can do is talk, especially about science. Now, the next one I want to mention is base. Base is a product that is pretty close to my heart. It was very, very, if I may say so myself, intelligently designed to be built on a 1-to-1 balance by mass of protein to fat. When you describe LC base to your friends and family, if you aren't describing it this way, I hope you'll take some of what I'm sharing and incorporate it into your conversations. It is built with those three nutritional principles in mind: control carbohydrates, prioritize protein, and it has among the best proteins available to humans. The best proteins to humans are egg whites, whey protein, and meat. Well, it's very hard to work with egg whites. They spoil very readily and have a very strong taste. Meat, we can't put that in any kind of shake, so we picked the best usable one of those three. It is one of the best proteins a human can take. So it's prioritizing protein and it is fueling with fat. So it is built, like I said, on this base of half protein, half fat. That mix is magical, if I may say so. It's not a very scientific term, but the combination does two things very well established in human clinical studies. First of all, when you take fat with protein together, the fat digestion helps with the protein digestion. For example, you may have a friend who's taken just pure whey protein powders, and they'll say, I can't have whey. Whey really upsets my stomach. Ask them to try base. because part of the problem of taking pure protein is that it is harder to digest. Some stomachs can handle it fine, some can't. But when you've eaten fat, the part of the process of digesting fat is to release these molecules called bile salts or bile acids. I'm sure you've heard of these before. We typically only think of these as being relevant to fat digestion, but the truth is in fact more interesting. Those bile salts, while also helping digest fat, will facilitate the protein digestion. They make the enzymes that break down proteins in our stomach that we need or in our intestines to help us digest them. They make them work better. So eating fat with protein helps the protein digest better. Now that might be part of what's responsible for the second principle I want to mention, or fact that I want to mention, which is that fat and protein are more anabolic than protein alone. There was a very well-controlled study done a number of years ago that had study subjects come and exercise, and then they pulled a little piece of their muscle following the exercise and determined that the muscles had grown a little after the exercise in the hours following the exercise. Then they had the study subjects repeat this another day and time, and they gave them a load of protein. And they found that the muscle development, the muscle growth went even beyond the exercise alone. Then they did one more intervention. They had them eat a 1-to-1 by mass, just like LC base, of protein to fat. And what they found is that it went one step beyond. There was something synergistic about the fat and the protein coming together. And you might be thinking, well, Ben, I'm not a meathead. I don't need big muscles. Yes, you do. You might not need big muscles, but you need capable and strong muscles, because having a healthy muscle mass is one of the greatest predictors of longevity. And not even longevity, but a healthy lifespan. You don't want to just live long. We want to live long, and we want to live capably into old age. We need functioning muscles and functioning bones. Both of those require anabolic reactions. And once again, fat and protein are more anabolic to our lean mass than protein alone. So that's a little bit about LC base. Now, the last one I want to mention is Unimate Fuel, which I love. To this day, I take Unimate Fuel and a half serving of LC base almost every morning. And then some mornings, if I'm still feeling a little full from the day before, or my workout the day before had not been hard, then I'll just take a plain Unimate. But if I've had a bit of a harder workout, or I'm feeling a little hungrier for breakfast, it is a smaller, I don't like getting too full for breakfast because I do my kind of relatively intense workout in the mid-morning, and I just don't like having too much food in my stomach. But it'll be Unimate Fuel and a half serving of base. Now, Unimate Fuel, once again, was designed very deliberately. I remember vividly when I first became involved with Unicity, which, again, I've enjoyed from day one. Unimate had just been released. If I remember correctly, and Clayton or Micah will correct me, I had come to the global convention, the GLIC, and I think it was in Singapore, maybe in 2016. If I'm not mistaken, Unimate had just been released. And I remember some people at Unicity being very worried about the taste, the bitterness, which carries over a little bit to Unimate Fuel. That bitter flavor is from the mate. That's actually a selling point. Isn't that funny for me to say? There are things in your intestines called bitter taste receptors. We, of course, taste bitterness on our mouth, but there are these extra oral bitter taste receptors. That's what they're called. And they run throughout your intestines. They also can sense those same molecules that we tasted as bitter as they move through the intestines. And they actually will result in hormones being released from the intestines to make the body more insulin sensitive. So when someone takes Unimate Fuel, or even Unimate, but I want to focus more on fuel, and they'll say, "Oh, that is a strong taste," you'll say, "Yep, in fact, that's part of the benefit." Now, it might seem, once again, you guys, I just said I don't like hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating. Bitter taste receptors are activated by the molecules in the mate. So that's one perk, at least from a metabolic scientist, of Unimate Fuel. And the mate itself accelerates fat metabolism. That was one of the strengths, that you are promoting the development of mitochondria. And the mitochondria, something we were literally just studying earlier today in my lab, that is the site of fat burning. So if we want to be accelerating fat burning, which we need to do to maintain our body fat or to reduce our body fat, like the people that Micah mentioned at the outset, mate can help this. We need a robust population of mitochondria in our cells. Now, with regards to fuel, the fats that we put in fuel were once again very deliberate. Coconut oil is among the most stable of all fats. Now that matters because that actually might be part of the pandemic of atherosclerosis and heart disease, the plaques that are forming in blood vessels. The idea is that less stable fats that we eat, like seed oils from soybean oil or canola oil or cottonseed oil, those are refined fats that are very unstable. And when we consume them, they promote the growth of atherosclerotic lesions much faster than any other fats. And coconut oil is the most stable of any fat we can eat. That's a good thing. It's also the most ketogenic because it has such a broad range of fats. It has some long chain fats, some medium chain fats, and short chain. The body can store long chain fats, but the body can't really store medium or short chain. So when we eat the coconut oil that comes with Unimate Fuel, the body starts burning it very rapidly. And as we start burning more fat, we start making more ketones, and ketones are a wonderful fuel for the brain. Indeed, the brain prefers ketones over glucose. This is once again human data done by infusing different amounts of glucose and ketones into people. And the moment the ketones are available, the brain switches its metabolism to rely more predominantly on ketones. And then one last comment, because I fear that I'm starting to lose you, that my students are getting a little bored. One last comment. Coconut oil is really the only source of a medium chain fat called lauric acid. It's a 12 carbon fat. Now, beyond its ability to be burned very rapidly and make ketones, it is actually very well established as an anti-pathogenic molecule. It is antibacterial and antiviral. Now, I am not making any claims. No one will misunderstand me or misconstrue what I'm saying. But there is a study going on in the Philippines right now looking at how coconut oil and lauric acid, that antiviral fatty acid, it actually attacks and kills pathogens, how it can be used to fight viral infections. Now, I'm not making any claims there. Please don't misunderstand me. It's a fascinating study, and it is going on now. So for all we know, it will prove nothing, and it will be the null hypothesis will be proved, and we'll say there's no benefit. But its antiviral and antibacterial activities are so strong that it's being looked at as an actual therapy in sterilizing and preventing, hopefully, boosting immune function. Now, to sum it up, as I've been kind of ranting and giving this sort of off the cuff, you want to continue to focus on the 3 nutritional principles that were designed to go along with Activate. Although I don't know to what degree, these are openly sort of shared. You want to focus on control carbohydrates. That's not to say we don't eat any. No, we just focus on the more natural, the less processed, like fruits and vegetables are perfect. Those that have kept the fiber in them. And then you can couple fiber to this diet as needed with balance. And then we prioritize protein and we fuel with fat. And those 2 principles, indeed all 3, is the basis of the Activate products that I saw the birth of, with specifically LC Base and Unimate Fuel. I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. I like I said before, it really is a fun opportunity for, I won't say old professor, but let's say certainly middle-aged professor and scientist to come share some science with you guys and imagine that you can take some of these principles and work it into your own stories.